I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't hear. And my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello, welcome to part 2 of our walkthrough of the affidavit. As you can see, it's quite cold today. I wanted to wear my t-shirt, but it just is too cold for that. Welcome to you guys. Chelsea, thanks for joining us. I just want to see if Sharon's here. Helena, good to see you as well. So I kind of want to start this off. I actually meant to put it in a poll. I guess I can still put up the poll. But I kind of want to start off by asking you guys quite a kind of strange question. I think before I put it on screen, let me get the gears rolling in your heads. What is agency? And I want to know what agency is because the question is, did Laurie and Chad have agency? And who had more agency between Laurie and Chad? It's quite an interesting question. While you guys are thinking about that, I'm going to put that in a poll. But do you guys know what agency is? If you do know, can you define it? I actually asked someone earlier today what agency was. They Googled it and then still came back with the wrong answer. Do you know what agency is? Can you define it? And if you can you apply it to Chad and Laurie? And then would you say, which one would you say has more agency between the two of them? Quite a mouthful. Between the two of them. So what I'm going to try and do is put it up in a poll while you guys are thinking about it. Who had more agency, Chad or Laurie? So you guys are welcome to vote in the poll, but I do think it's important that we can define what it is before we decide what it is. Let's have a look at some of your answers. I see Laurie's already at 100%. Christina says Laurie by far. Francisco says it's the power, influence, control, or power, influence, and control of. Okay. Zergon says power over another. Mel says power. Agency is power. Okay, some good answers. That's a good one. I quite like that one from Trisha. Freedom to choose your choices. Pauline says social and psychological pull. It's also true. Abby says it's the power of your ideas. True. It's also quite a good definition. So it's quite interesting. Some of you are saying that you feel Chad had more agency. And so what we want to really do in this analysis is think about that, because basically at the end of the day, whoever had more agency in this case is more guilty, I would say. And so it is quite an important question. So I'm going to put it on screen, the answer. Can you guys see that? So here's just a nice complete definition. Agency is the sense of control that you feel in your life. So keyword there, control. Your capacity, so it's control, capacity and ability, right? So just take those three words: control, capacity, ability, right? And so let's read that. Agency is the sense of control that you feel in your life, your capacity to influence your own thoughts. Note, it's your own thoughts and behavior, and then have faith in your ability to handle a wide range of tasks and situations. Obviously, if you can influence your own thoughts and behavior, well, then obviously you have the ability to influence other people. Your sense of agency helps you to be psychologically stable. So, another way of addressing this question is, who was the more psychologically stable between Chad and Laurie? Also, who is the most flexible in the face of conflict or change, Chad or Laurie? That's where it gets a little bit more complicated, doesn't it? But basically, control, capacity to influence, ability to handle a wide range of tasks and situations. Now, what is really, I think, interesting about this whole thing is, sure, we are going to go into this, we're going to think about this as we go through the affidavit. We're going to think about this as it relates to Chad and Laurie. But I think it's also very interesting, once we've done that, to turn the finger back to ourselves and say, how much agency do I have? And, if you think about it, Chad is kind of like a chump. He's someone whose background is a grave digger, and he became quite an influential person in a sense. He wrote books. People started paying attention to him. He became a minor celebrity. I don't know if that's even the right term, but he certainly was developing agency and developing a following. And think about how he did it. He basically, I mean, was that agency based on anything real, right? And then if you take Laurie, she also developed a certain amount of agency. If you think about it, you think about their agency that they developed. They developed control over other people. People were willing to give them time, money, I don't know, a lot of attention. People were willing to sort of um, put faith in them and give their allegiance in some ways to them. People were willing to change their lives, quit their jobs, and so on and so on. And if you think about that, um, how much, I mean, do you think that you have less agency than Laurie at the end of the day? Do you think that you have less agency than Chad? And so agency can, in a sense, just be a matter of how much you decide you have. And of course, it's important to be realistic about it and to be authentic about it. But if you think about it, some people actually don't have agency, and yet they exert a tremendous amount of agency over other people. And so, anyway, what I'm trying to get to is, I want to encourage you that maybe your agency is greater than you think it is, especially when you look at other people who are perhaps not very qualified, such as Chad and Laurie, people who have are making great claims to strength and authority and control, but they can't really back it up. And if you think about it, probably or possibly your agency is something that you need to think about. Um, it's maybe you have more than you realize. On the other hand, maybe you have less than you realize, and it's something to work on. And then you might say, well, how can I work on it? Right? And there are, I think, a couple of answers to that. So there's the definition again. Let's put it up like that. Agency is the sense of control that you feel in your life. So ask yourself, do you have a sense of control in your life? Do you have freedom to make certain choices? If you don't, what do you need to do that? Something that while you're alive, you can kind of say, like, you shouldn't think about agency at the end of your life and reflect and say, well, I really wish I'd had more control over my life. Maybe that's something to think about every couple of years, to say, where's my agency now? Is it increasing? Is it continuing to increase? Has it flatlined? Is it going down? Is it right? Should I have I had too much control in terms of my life? What was that influence? Too much of a burden, all that kind of thing, right? Also, as my ability, as my resilience to handle challenges improved or gotten worse, and if it has gotten worse, what can I do to improve it? So all really important questions. Anyway, that is basically just an introduction to. We're going to now go into the affidavit, and I want you to think about as we go through the last, I think it's 16 pages. Think about the agency, the sense of control, the capacity to influence, the abilities of the individuals to influence their kind of situation. Okay. So we ended on page 16. Let's go to, sorry, page 10. And we're going to go there right now. By the way, welcome Shaker Maker, our newest member. Welcome. Sharon, good to see you here. Shall I make the text a little bit bigger? Timmy's sitting on my hand. Okay, I think that should do it. So this is page 10. Now we're going to go to page 11. Ready. So it's point number 33. Upon exposing the round object, so what had happened was they had, the FBI were on site, they were removing dirt, rocks, boards, so flat rocks, 2 pieces of flat paneling. They removed that under the tree. I think it's a willow tree next to a pond. And they also noticed that the ground had been disturbed, that the ground had different kind of growth on it. And so when they dug in that place, this is what the result was. Let me see if I can make it even a little bit bigger. I'll take myself out slightly. So upon exposing the round object covered in black plastic, a strong odor was noticed. Now, I think that is already telling you something. Why do you think it was necessary for the grave digger to place the body in plastic? And there's quite a lot of plastic. It was like almost like a mummy. The little body of J.J. Vallow, as it turned out, was kind of wrapped in. He was sort of in a plastic bag, and then another plastic bag, and another plastic bag, and then duct tape wrapped around extensively, and that is actually where a hair of Laurie's got was found on I think on the duct tape on the outside of all of this. And so why do you think it was necessary to use this plastic in the first place, right? And this is the counter to the way that Tylee was disposed of. And I must apologize for it sounding maybe quite clinical. Obviously, these were 2 beautiful young people, lively young people. They had their lives ahead of them, and they were human beings. They were basically a boy and a young lady, and we must remember them as people. But I do think in terms of the crime, one's got to also just think about how the criminal psychology dealt with the situation. And the situation was basically you could prevent the long-term odor aspect by incinerating the remains. The problem is you would have the odor of the incinerating, or the odor of the burning, kind of immediately present to start off with, right? So that was, I think, the issue that they didn't like, certainly that somebody didn't like. And so although you now don't have the smoke, you don't have the initial odor, the problem is by simply wrapping remains in plastic, they are now going to be kind of contained in that plastic, and although the odor won't disappear, you are in a way sort of preserving in a way those remains, and that does come with some risk, as is apparent now. So let's have a look at this. A FBI member used a small sharp instrument and made a small incision in the plastic, and a layer of white plastic was observed. So can you see, they say it exposed a round object in black plastic. Then they cut into the plastic and there was white plastic under the black plastic. An incision was made into the white layer of plastic, exposing what appeared to be human remains, the crown of a head covered in light brown hair, right? Now, when I was in court, um, I don't know, like we saw some of the evidence. So we saw some, I remember seeing the bucket. I remember seeing what they're talking about here. You know, you saw kind of a round, almost like a glistening round ball in the ground, right? And but I mean, it's very, you're seeing very little. You're just seeing some dirt with a kind of a round ball, and then they cut into that ball, and then they realized, okay, so this is or was a person, and then they went on to uncover the rest. One's also got to wonder, is there any symbolism in white, the color white being on the inside, and in terms of the plastic, and the color black being on the outside? Now, I suppose you might say it's a silly thing to say, but there are certainly two possibilities. The one is that maybe there's a spiritual significance, that despite there being JJ becoming a zombie, um, you know, he was still, you know, the inside of him was still intact, if you want to put it that way. Another way of thinking about it is simply, what would be more visible for someone digging, white plastic or black plastic? And I think the answer is white plastic. So, you know, if you wanted to bury something, and eventually a part stuck out, I think it would be less easy to notice black plastic in dark ground. That's certainly my way of thinking about it. I don't, if you have to ask me what is more likely, that someone is thinking about the spiritual symbolism or the practical way of hiding a body, what would you say? I would say it's the practical um, aspect. As you said, is very disturbing. It is too bad that Alex isn't around as well. If he was around, there would be a third person on trial for murder, right? And it would be interesting to see what he would do. Would he turn on Chad? Would he turn on Laurie? Probably not. But what would he say? You know, what would happen? I agree, practical. Let's have a look at the poll. Please vote if you haven't already. It's quite even. 61%, almost two-thirds of you say Laurie had more agency, and then around about a third, a little bit more than a third, say Chad had more agency. We will come back to that. Please do vote if you haven't already. Now, bear in mind a couple of things regarding agency. Laurie moves to Chad, not the other way around. Also, Laurie loses her husband, well, her ex-husband, Charles. I'm just talking about like a body count. Laurie loses Charles, and two of Laurie's children die. None of Chad's children die. So, you know, on the one side of the equation, three people die on Laurie's side of the equation. One person dies on Chad's side, Tammy. And so, if you think about it, who is influencing who? Whose influence is coming to bed? Did Chad want JJ and Tylee to die? Where did that idea come from? and whose influence basically perpetuated that idea. So I think there are quite a few dimensions to this question. Timmy, do you mind sitting up a bit more? Okay. Right. The remaining dirt around this object was methodically removed, exposing what appeared to be a body wrapped in black plastic. The plastic appeared to be tightly wrapped around the body and secured with grey duct tape. Cheryl Anderson, associate professor of anthropology at Boise State University, was present on scene and advised the remains found near the pond appeared to be human. Now, if you think about it, this is like 9 months after the fact. You know, poor little JJ was killed in September 2019. His little body was found under the tree, excavated around about 9 months later. So there's still a smell 9 months later. That is the disadvantage of this method of disposal using the plastic. I mean, you can seal the smells from going out, but you seal everything that's inside as well. And so, as it turned out, you could do a kind of an autopsy on JJ where you couldn't do anything like that on Tylee. Okay, let's continue. Ground in this area was probed with a steel pole, and several areas of disturbed ground were located. During a search of this ground, a buried cat and dog were found. Hold on. I think we've just gone down a little bit. So anyway, it says here, a second site of interest was located behind a red unattached outbuilding located roughly in the center of the property. So, obviously they found JJ's remains first, although JJ wasn't actually killed first or buried first, right? So they found the remains kind of out of order. They excavated the remains out of order. So they seem to think it was more likely, I guess, that there was a grave by JJ's remains. And bear in mind, his remains were slightly, I don't want to say fresher, but slightly younger, not by much, maybe by a week or two. I don't know if that would really have factored into it much. Anyway, the second site of interest was located behind a red unattached outbuilding, obviously the east side of the barn, roughly in the center of the property near a fire pit. Next to the fire pit is an area used as a pet cemetery. Sorry, Timmy, close your ears. This site correlated to several GPS pings of Alex Cox's phone on September 9, 2019. So this was essentially how they were sort of moving over the site. Was they were sort of on the site, and there was like an army of people, and they were referring to the GPS data on Alex Cox's phone and saying, okay, the GPS data is that we need to go over there. What do you notice over there? So that was kind of the way that they were finding their way to the two grave sites. Pretty incredible if you think about it. Yes, now point number 37. Ground in this area was probed with a steel pole, and several areas of disturbed ground were located. So the same thing, despite 9 months passing, you could tell that the ground had been disturbed in both cases. The vegetation still hadn't done very much. Bear in mind, September is sort of the end of summer, so any ground that you've disturbed isn't really going to grow back very quickly or easily, as opposed to if it had been at the beginning of summer, right? Okay. A buried cat and dog remains were found. A backhoe was used to dig further layers of dirt, right? And a backhoe is a vehicle, I guess, that also comes up quite a lot in in another case that doesn't it come up in the Morphew case? Anyway, let's continue. While doing this, bricks were located approximately a foot below the ground. So you've got something similar here as well, where there were flat rocks used in JJ's grave, placed above the body, above the wrapped garbage bags. Now you've got bricks arranged in the same way, and I guess that's to do two things. One is to prevent the ground from settling, from subsiding, which is going to, the grave digger is thinking, I don't want to give away that there's a grave here. So that's the one thing, to prevent subsidence. And then the other reason is perhaps to prevent access. So if someone is just digging for fun, digging a sand pit or whatever, and they encounter bricks or rock, they might be dissuaded from digging any further. So it's a kind of protective barrier in case of sort of random digging, right? Marta says, I voted for Chad as being the mastermind, but now I think Laurie was the planner and Chad the one taking action. Pauline says, it's a wonder Chad didn't bury Tammy in the pet cemetery. Not really, because Tammy was, the way Chad played it was that Tammy had simply just died of natural causes. So that was sort of hidden in plain sight. Tammy just stopped breathing. Maybe you could say it was a heart attack or something. Anyway, let's continue. Once the bricks were discovered, the soil was examined and what appeared to be 2 bones were located. Based on the condition of the bones, Cheryl Anderson was not able to determine whether the bones were human. Methodically, the dirt in this area was searched and several other items of interest were found, including other bones. And there you have it, charred tissue, charred bones. So initially, they're finding bones, but they can't even tell what they are. They can't tell if they're human because they've been damaged, they've been partially destroyed. But then they find more and more bones and also uncharred bones, pieces of uncharred bones. So whoever did this seems to have run out of time, run out of patience, perhaps run out of kindling. We know that in the Patrick Frazee case, and I wrote a book about that case, Patrick and his accomplice, Crystal Kenny, basically made a huge bonfire on like the driveway, this massive fire, which eventually melted the plastic tote, and there was literally nothing left of poor Kelsey's remains except a tiny fragment of one of her teeth. But that tiny fragment was enough for an anthropologist to say it's human and it's female. And the crazy thing about that case is, as I wrote a book about it, I was actually in Cripple Creek. I was in front of that courthouse when I was last in America. I also went to the area of Frazee's farm and so on. But the amazing thing was the people who were doing the investigation, they were sitting down on that driveway and they were sifting through all the dirt. And they'd been doing this for an hour or hours. And they literally came to the very last scoop of dirt that they put through kind of a sieve. And it was that last scoop that they found this fragment of Kelsey's tooth. But what I'm trying to say is fire can be an effective way to totally destroy human remains where there's like literally nothing left, just like fine powder. In fact, what they found on the, sorry for the graphic description, but what they found on the Frazee driveway was sort of like a hardened patch, like a black patch, which they felt some of it was um, the burnt plastic of the tote that had sort of melted and kind of soaked into the gravel and become kind of a crust. And then they felt that there was some other material that wasn't plastic, that could have been like human fat or something, that was also in that sort of space. And anyway, the point being, Patrick Frazee did an almost perfect job in burning this body, whereas you can tell that whoever did this in poor Tylee's case ran out of something, ran out of time. As I say, could have run out of kindling. Maybe just gave up on whatever they were doing, and seemed to make kind of a mess of that particular crime scene, which is maybe why they didn't continue. Um, it is also possible that um, the murder of Tylee and the disposal of Tylee was something that just trying to let me just make sure of this. I'm just trying to see whether they knew about this, the trial of Patrick Frazee before the murder. So Tylee was murdered in September 2019. The trial of Patrick Frazee was a year later, so I don't think it was actually a factor. Hold on, no, it wasn't. Patrick Frazee convicted of killing his fiancée. That was in November 2019. I still think it's too late. So I don't really think that it was something they learned from that trial. It's hard to say. I think one's got to look at what information appeared in the media and when. I can't tell you for sure any of that kind of thing. Anyway, let's go back to the affidavit. Methodically, the dirt in this area was searched and several other items of interest were found. Investigators provided photos of some of the partial remains that were found at the Pet Cemetery to Dr. Sarah Getz, PhD, a forensic anthropologist. Dr. Getz was able to identify those remains as being non-adult human remains. And now we deal with Chad. What is Chad doing during this search? While officers were conducting their search, Chad Daybell was observed by officers to be continuously watching where officers were searching. He was observed watching officers while sitting in his vehicle in his front driveway and while sitting in his vehicle across the street at his daughter's residence. So certainly one of the potential eyewitnesses in terms of line of sight, in terms of people hearing a gunshot, in terms of that could testify against him is his own daughter, right? Across the road. So that's his daughter's residence. Just trying to think of somebody else who did the same thing. Scott Peterson also observed the searches of San Francisco Bay directly, and he actually went on the run. I think he was assuming that they were getting closer and closer, and then of course he went on the run. You can imagine, think about this, if Chad Daybell did bury even one of those children in his garden, you can imagine how nervous he had to have been. You can imagine how his heart had to have beating. You can imagine how the honeymoon is over, but now it's going to be really over. You can imagine how he's seeing his own doomsday sort of unfolding. You can imagine how he is seeing the what do they call it? He sees the sort of tea leaves coming into a particular shape. He sees the What's that saying? You see the chips on the wall, or you see the writing on the wall. Isn't there something in the Bible where God actually wrote something on a wall? Isn't that where that saying came from? D. Patterson says Chad was talking on the mobile to Laurie, who was in jail. So you can imagine what she's thinking as well. Because if it was her idea to bury the children on Chad's property, and Chad said, "Okay, yeah, let's do that." Um, Laurie didn't have any idea exactly what, when, and where. I don't think she was there when it happened, but Chad probably would have had some idea, or possibly would have had some idea. And yeah, I think the writing was a bit on the wall, right? Okay, let's continue. Around the time the head mentioned in paragraphs 32 and 33 were discovered, Chad Daybell was observed leaving his daughter's residence in a grey SUV. So you kind of get the idea. He knew that something was found. He knew what it was. And is he kind of trying to go on the run? Where's he going? I and other officers pursued him in police vehicles, conducted a traffic stop, and detained him due to the fact that human remains were discovered on his property. Now, if he was innocent, why on earth? And I mean, this will probably come up at trial. If he's innocent, why does he leave his property at that time of all times? Wouldn't he say, "What is it?" and want to know what it is, and you know? But doesn't that seem to suggest guilty knowledge? What is this? So we've now dealt with the probable cause affidavit of Chair Daybell. We're going to just go through the same thing for Laurie Vallow, but of course, um, there's some overlap between Chad and Laurie, right? So let's start. So he says, remember the thing we're trying to ascertain here. It is who had agency, who had the most agency in this particular case. So let's see if we can get some clarity on that. So let's start here. On the afternoon of November 25th, 2019, the Rexburg Police Department was contacted by the Gilbert, Arizona Police Department about a missing child. I think they mean JJ, not JV. Or are they basically saying Joshua Vallow? JJ is a 7-year-old boy with autism who was supposed to be living with his adopted mother. JJ's grandmother, Kay Woodcock, had contacted the Gilbert Police Department about JJ for a welfare check. I do remember when I was in Boise, when I was attending court, that the Woodcocks were at trial every single day, and then one day they weren't there, and they said, well, it's because they're going to be dealing with the autopsy evidence. So I think that was really the issue. Joshua Jackson Vallow. Laurie Vallow also has a daughter, Tylee Ryan. As described further in this affidavit, the investigation grew to include a search for Tylee as well. I'm aware that Laurie moved to Rexburg with the children near the first week of September. I'm aware that JJ was enrolled for 3 weeks at Kennedy Elementary School. I'm further aware that he was seen by neighbors at and near his apartment in Rexburg. Now, just to come back to this idea of agency, what I found kind of astonishing was that, do you remember Laurie had no defense? right? Remember, Laurie basically had no defense case. Um, no one, as far as I can remember, testified in support of Laurie. Um, at the end of the day, Laurie made a kind of a half-baked, pathetic statement that didn't really make a lot of sense. It almost seemed to be like she was trying to convince you that she was incompetent. That seemed to be her play. The other thing to think about is Laurie did sort of move in and out of being competent, incompetent to stand trial, competent, incompetent. Letitia Stork did the same thing. Now, if you are doing that, is that a sign of agency, saying, I'm incompetent to stand trial? Because Chair Daybell has never made um, that call. Now, I guess you could say if you're competent and you say you're incompetent, or you claim to be incompetent, or you act like you're incompetent, and somehow it is believed, is that a sign of agency? I wouldn't really say so. I wouldn't really say so. I mean, that's kind of taking the kind of trying to cheat your way out of the whole thing, right? So it's going to be interesting to see if Chad testifies. I think that is a sign of agency of a sort. Sometimes it's ill advised, but sometimes it can have a positive effect, like Jodi Arias. Um, I think someone did feel sorry for her in that particular courtroom. Well, absolutely. You know, a killer. Um, I think the important part to ask is whether the killer thinks he has agency, because you know, part of the reason they commit the crime is because they they feel powerless, right? uh, Part of the reason we don't commit crimes, part of the reason good citizens don't commit crimes, is because we are sort of able to deal with problems in a mature, intelligent, civilized, proper, lawful manner, because we have agency. We've got various ways that we can deal with life's problems. Someone who kills to deal with a problem, like let's say it's financial problems, and I mean, in a very basic way, that is exactly what Laurie did. She turned family members into kind of income. Like Laurie didn't have a job. Laurie could have gotten a job, but instead she got rid of family members and cashed their checks, or tried to. And so, doesn't that show kind of a acknowledgement from Laurie's side that I don't actually have any agency? Um, when Laurie deals with people, she seems to have a tremendous amount of agency. There's one incident where an officer came to her home, and she's incredibly charming, and she's very bubbly, but she doesn't quite convince the officer what she's saying. She sort of does, and that leads to quite a lot of time going by. But I think another question to ask is, does Laurie have agency in general, like generally with people? What sort of jobs did Laurie have in general? How much money did Laurie make in and of herself in general? And then another side to that conversation is, what was Laurie's sexual agency? And if you think about the fact that she had, was it 5 marriages, you would imagine there's quite a lot of sexual agency going on uh, in that department. And so I think what we're talking about here is Laurie's got a particular kind of agency, no doubt about it. But Chad's got a different kind of agency in an area that Laurie doesn't have. What do you think about that? So the levels of agency kind of complemented one another. Does that make sense? Okay, let's continue. I am further aware that he was seen by neighbors at Anier's apartment in Rexburg. Through the investigation, RPD has learned that the last day JJ was seen alive was on September 23rd at Kennedy Elementary School. Kennedy Elementary has informed RPD that no other school has made requests for JJ's school transcripts. Okay. I just want to see if I can get hold of the affidavit related to Tammy Daybell. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be really any different. Are you guys aware of an affidavit that shows the evidence related to Tammy? I mean, I was in court. I listened to the talk about the foam. Uh, Actually, wondering whether I was in court when that was discussed, because I had to leave early to meet someone in Oregon. Um, I'm just wondering whether there's not a affidavit dealing with that. Anyone know about it? Anyway, let's continue. If you do, just let me know in the chat. Okay, the vehicle mentioned in paragraph 6 of this affidavit is a 2018 gray Jeep Wrangler bearing Texas license plate, blah, blah, blah. Said vehicle is registered to Charles Vallow. And obviously, when Tylee died, who got her vehicle? I mean, that vehicle belonged to Tylee, was actually Charles's vehicle, right? And guess who gets that vehicle? I mean, that's quite a big deal getting a vehicle, right? Iceland, good to see you here. Okay. Um, the Gilbert Police Department were interested in this vehicle because it had been identified in an attempted shooting of a Brandon Boudreaux in Gilbert, Arizona. Now, what's so disturbing about this case is if it's not bad enough that two children were murdered, then, and if it's not bad enough that you add to that there was Charles Vallow murdered, and that trial still got to be dealt with. If it's not bad enough that Tammy, that's now four people. There was also an attempted murder on Brandon Boudreaux. Now we going up to five potential dead people. And then I think there was also an attempted murder on Tammy, where someone sort of arrived at her driveway wearing a ski mask. So you kind of have four murders, two attempted murders, it appears, and then potentially even, I mean, was Alex Cox murdered or did he just die? It's potentially even a fifth murder. It's quite a huge body count potentially. Sharon, indictment for Tammy's death. I wonder whether we can bring that up. Indictment. Is there much information in that? Chair Daybell is also charged with insurance fraud in connection with Tammy Daybell's death and 2 counts of conspiracy. So if you think about it, it's not just Chad needs Tammy to die so that he can marry someone else, so that he can be with another woman. There was also a financial incentive in it as well. Just give me a second. I just want to look at what I've got here. This is May 25th, 2021. So just says here, Tammy Daybell was found dead in her home on October 19, 2019. A medical examiner has since ruled that death a homicide. Now, if you think of what we've been talking about, who has more agency, think about the fact that Tylee dies, but her body is taken somewhere else. JJ dies, his body is taken somewhere else. Tammy is found dead in her home. Is that telling you anything about the agency of the killer, the confidence of the killer? Just have a look at what I've got here. Okay, East Idaho News. Let's just have a look at that. So at the moment, 55% saying Laurie, 45% saying Chad. It's quite close, isn't it? Okay, so I've got another link here. State of Idaho versus Chad Daybell. And I think this is updated, filed 19th of the 12th, 2023. Okay, just give me a second. I really just want to deal with Tammy Daybell. Daybell is charged as a co-conspirator on some counts in the indictment. He is nevertheless also charged with first-degree murder for the murder of Tamara Tammy Daybell, a crime that is punishable by death. Distinct from any of Vallow's convictions, further reveals that a determination of relative culpability is speculative when considered before trial. So it's kind of what we've been talking about, relative culpability. Who had the most agency in this particular case? Therefore, Daybell's argument about relative culpability is not persuasive as a basis to strike the death penalty. This is more just sort of court arguments. I've also got this State of Idaho dated 21st of the 3rd, 2023. But those are jury instructions, not really what I'm looking for. Notice of the intent to seek death penalty. Let's just see. I mean, I can continue going through that affidavit, but it doesn't really deal with Tammy, which is what I really wanted to do. probably should have see if it's in this one. Sorry, guys. Don't know if this is this the same as. Okay, let's have a look at the article from East Idaho News. Daybell indictments lay out details surrounding deaths and other alleged crimes. Read the indictments here, okay? Daybell indictment. Chair Daybell. Can I download it? Nine pages, okay. This might be the one. Okay, let's blow that up a bit. Okay. So this is basically it. On or between October 26 and June 9, 2020, Chad did endorse and espouse religious beliefs for the purpose of encouraging and or justifying the homicide of Tylee Ryan. That's quite a long period. It's not October 26, 2019 or September 2019. It's going back to October 26, 2018. Do you remember yesterday I said, if you're going to write a book about this, if you're going to make a documentary about this, where would you start? Like, when would you start? And maybe you would want to start October 26. Maybe you'd want to start when they start going up a gear. Chad and Laurie, when they start going up a gear in their sort of religious fervor, when they start departing from their sort of baseline beliefs, when they start prepping, I guess, when they start getting interested in that whole prepping thing. Okay. Then on or about August 16, 2019, Laurie changed the deposit of Tylee Ryan's Social Security benefits from Tylee Ryan's JP Morgan Chase account to deposit money directly into Laurie's personal BBVA account. Not quite sure why that's relevant to Chad, but I mean, it is part of the Chad Daybell. See, it's the indictments for Chad and Laurie. Okay, so that does make sense. So yeah, you even have Alex Cox on here. The defendants, Chad, Laurie, Alex Cox, and other co-conspirators, both known and unknown, on or between the dates of there and there, are part of a continuing criminal transaction. I'm trying to think, didn't Melanie Gibb take out a plea deal, and didn't somebody else take out a plea deal in this case? So we're going to just look at what this says about Tammy, but it doesn't look like it says much. It seems to be really just saying the basics, that she is deceased. So here it is, overt acts. Can you guys see that? In furtherance of the conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree of Tammy Daybell. So, when you're thinking about first degree murder, that's premeditated murder. That's like the worst kind of murder. And to affect the objects thereof, one or more of the following acts were committed. On or between the dates of October 26, 2018 and June 9, Chad encouraged the religious beliefs for the purpose of justifying the homicide of Tammy Daybell. So, at some point, Chad apparently communicated to Laurie and likely to Alex, Laurie's brother, that Tammy was a zombie, I guess. And so that meant, you know what? Um, I seem to remember that close to the time that Tammy saw someone in a ski mask, or something strange happened to her, um, Alex's phone was pinged somewhere like a mile from the Daybell property. So there was I seem to remember that it seemed like he was either spying on her or lurking in the whole area. But ultimately, I don't think he committed the crime. I don't know. I think he just couldn't get to her, if that's the way of putting it. Um, there you have text messages between Chad and Laurie regarding death percentages for Tammy and JJ in messages on July 30th. And so you had the same thing happening with Tammy. So there was kind of a formula before each and every one of these deaths. Death percentages, Chad would say it's moving closer to this point, it's moving closer, it's almost there. Oh, the number is now, based on this calculation, the person's now a zombie. They moved over to the dark side. Um, Text messages between Chad and Laurie regarding death percentages for Tammy and JJ in messages on July 30th. So if you think about this, someone said yesterday, is this crime premeditated? Well, they're talking about death percentages for Tammy and death percentages for JJ in July 2019. So that's the whole of August has got to go by, right? That's an entire month, and then another kind of couple of weeks, week or two, or three, um, for JJ, and then really another month on top of that. So Tammy's death was basically premeditated about 3 months before. JJ is about a month and a half. This is also, I think, very significant. Look at this. Daybell obtained a burner phone on September 18, 2019. Alex Cox obtained a burner phone on October 9, 2019, barely 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later. Text messages between Chad and Laurie about Tammy being in limbo and Tammy being possessed by a spirit named Viola. September 8th, 2019. Now, can you imagine dealing with these people in real life? Can you imagine you say something to someone that's part of this cult and they just don't like it, or it's dangerous to them, or it's um, something that's going to be problematic to them? Well, then it's quite easy to deal with. Instead of talking to you or reasoning with you or um, resolving the problem, well, you simply become in limbo and you can be killed, and then that's the problem solved. So there you have it. Alex attempted to shoot Tammy Daybell on October 9, 2019. As I said, so besides 4 murders, there are 2 attempted murders. The other one is this one. Brandon had previously been married to Laurie's niece, Melanie Boudreau. So it seems like Laurie's niece, I say this under correction, did Laurie's niece also did she also drink the Kool-Aid? At the time of his attempted shooting, Brandon witnessed the Jeep, which he recognized as being the same Jeep that Tylee regularly drove. Brandon observed a rifle with a silencer come out of the rear window of the Jeep, and then Brandon's vehicle was shot once in the front driver's door frame. As Brandon drove away, the Jeep followed but eventually turned a different direction. This same Jeep, observed by Brandon, was seized pursuant by a search warrant in November. It is significant that the vehicle Tiley reportedly regularly drove was still in Rexburg nearly 2 months after the last known sighting of Tiley. Who do you think was driving that Jeep when Brandon Boudreaux was almost killed? Who do you think was driving that Jeep when Tammy almost died? And I think the thing that's quite significant here is um, the preferred method of killing seems to be a gun. And guess who was a gun enthusiast in the story? Alex Cox. Okay, where were we? Not there. There. Okay, I think this is going to be a shorter live than yesterday's. Um, Alex Cox conducted multiple internet searches between the dates of October 8th and October 12th, including searches related to Grendel drop and shooting through a Dodge Dakota. What is Grendel drop? Anybody know? Grendel drop. What? Grendel drop. Okay, I'm not quite sure what that's all about. What are you guys saying? It is pretty exhausting. It's pretty exhausting. So, if Alex was holding the firearm, who was driving? And that's where it gets really interesting. Again, if you talk about agency, was it Laurie driving her daughter's vehicle and directing her brother, or was it Chad driving and Laurie's brother doing whatever? Another area where you can talk about agency is Laurie's brother basically is like Laurie's skivvy. Do you guys know the word skivvy? Alex is kind of like a pawn, like an employee, like a dog's body. He basically sort of runs errands for Laurie, and there is talk that maybe there was some sort of sexual relationship between brother and sister. But I mean, if you're talking about agency, if you have a sibling kind of acting almost like your employee, then I suppose one could say one has a certain amount of agency more than another person. But then she also doesn't have a job, so it's a little bit different. Thanks a lot, AJ. Thanks for that. Let's have a look at the poll. We are at Chad 45%, Laurie 55%, 130 votes. Please do vote if you haven't already. Thanks a lot for that, Christine. Thank you. Christine Webb in Canada. I hope the weather is starting to warm up there. I know it's starting to cool down here, if that's any comfort. Okay. Right, let's go back to this. Alex going to a gun range in the months before October 9 when the attempted shooting of Tamara Daybell takes place. There's a little bit of intertextuality with Caitlin Armstrong also goes to a gun range before shooting somebody. So, this is going to a gun range not just for fun, but to literally become familiar and effective at killing people. Chelsea says a little warmer where I am. That's good to hear. Okay. Alex traveled from Sportsman's Warehouse to the vicinity of the Daybell residence on October 9, 2019. Alex was in the church parking lot approximately 2.5 miles from the Daybell residence on the night of October 18, 2019. So there you have it. Remember, I said I seem to remember him being a mile from the Daybell residence. Well, 2.5 miles. And so that is a little bit suspicious, isn't it? So uh, October 18, 2019, let's read about that. The defendant Chair Daybell on October 18 or 19 in the county of Fremont, state of Idaho, was concerned in the commission of a first-degree murder and did aid and abet in its commission, and did so with malice aforethought, did so willfully. Um, did either kill Tammy Daybell or assist in the killing of Tammy Daybell, or did encourage the killing of Tammy Daybell, or did command another to kill. So I think what that shows is a certain amount of uncertainty from the authorities, certainly at this point. Did Chad kill Tammy? Did Chad ask somebody else to kill her? Did he assist someone? Right? And I know it says in the autopsy that Tammy was asphyxiated, but I think you can see that there's some uncertainty here. If you're not even sure who committed the crime directly, can you be absolutely sure of exactly what happened during the crime? Um, I'm not really doubting that she was asphyxiated. I'm doubting that she was manually strangled, and there's a difference. The other thing that one's got to consider, as I've said, is she was in a house with other people inside the house, and no one heard anything, and that you've got to wonder how can you possibly do that. Um, you might say, well, you just put a pillow over that person, but you can still shout through a pillow. You can still fight back for quite a few minutes or seconds during a physical contest like that. You can kick your legs, and the bed can make all sorts of noises. So it's not to say that it was just a simple asphyxiation. Grand theft felony. Let's just deal with that. The defendant, Laurie Vallow, between October 1 and January 2022, um, as a common scheme or plan or continuing criminal transaction between Madison and Fremont counties by deceit and with intent to deprive another of property, to wit, what is it? Social Security survivor benefits allocated to Tylee and JJ, and Social Security child in care benefits allocated to in an amount exceeding $1,000. Insurance fraud, Chair Daybell. So can you see it's not just murder, it's murder for money. Money is a very big part of all of this. And I think it was the prosecutor in the Jodi Arias case said, in his experience, crimes are committed either because of sex or for money or both. And I would say it's both in this case. What do you guys say? Another aspect in terms of agency that's certainly worth thinking about is who had more money in between Chad and Laurie. Now, if you think about it, I mean, some people could say that that money, wealth, is a sign or a symptom of agency, right? Think about agency through the prism of money, right? The sense of control that you feel in your life. Well, if you've got no money, you don't have really any control. Let me say that again. If you have absolutely no money, you don't have control over your life. If you've got a lot of money, you've got quite a lot of control over your life, theoretically. Your capacity to influence your own thoughts and behavior. Well, if you've got money, you can potentially go to a shrink, you can read certain books, you've got time to consider certain things. You have an ability to handle a wide range of tasks and situations. Well, somebody who has money well, some people are workaholics and they compromise in certain ways, but people with money, certainly in my experience, have quite a lot of leisure time. Um, a friend of mine who was quite wealthy, um, certainly was very good at handling many different situations. He also had quite a lot of leisure time. He would work very hard, and then he would also exercise quite hard, and he would also travel. So, money, I think, there is I think, a definite relationship between money and agency. I'm not saying it's always like that, because you can be um, someone like the character in Fury Road. You can have absolutely nothing and yet have a tremendous amount of personal agency, confidence in yourself, physical strength, determination, all that kind of thing. It's not to say that without money you can't have that. Money certainly helps, and people who do have agency tend to be able to influence other people. They've got certain talents, charisma, education, whatever it is, and they're just able to create a certain amount of empire around them. Elon Musk is probably a good example. Um, he's not powerful because he's wealthy. I think he's powerful because of his ideas and because of the original sense of agency, if that makes sense, right? So if we apply this, and that's the important thing, if you apply this to Chad and Laurie, who wins in the money through agency stakes between Chad and Laurie? What do you guys think? I would say Chad, because if you think about it, Chad was able to afford quite a good defense lawyer. Chad was able to pay for quite a expensive defense lawyer, whereas Laurie's defense was, I think, public defenders, wasn't it? So certainly in the that aspect, one could say that Chad has the edge in terms of the agency thing. Also, Chad kind of has a job. He's an author. He writes. He owns some property. He's kind of got things going. What is Laurie really doing? Laurie is marrying guys, but how is Laurie earning money? And that's really the problem. And one does wonder, if you take this case and the Chris Watts case, if even and I guess even the uh, Michelle Troconis case, and if you take all three of those cases, and you say, if you gave, let's say, $2 million or $1 million, but you gave quite a lot of money to those individuals, would they still have committed murder? In other words, did they commit murder because they felt financially they couldn't afford the alternative? Did Laurie commit murder because she felt she couldn't afford not to? Um, and I mean, a very interesting question arises: if Laurie did get the $1 million from Charles's death, would anyone else have been murdered? And I really think the answer is no. Um, Chad could have divorced his wife, um, and it's an interesting question. I mean, if you could put it into AI, I wonder what the result would be. If Chad, if Laurie inherited that $1 million, would people still have died? Maybe Charles would still have died, and maybe Tammy would still have died, but maybe the children wouldn't have died. Maybe that's the kind of middle ground. So let's have a look at the poll. It's now neck and neck. Laurie 54%, Chad 46%. Quite interesting. Okay, let's finalize this. Insurance fraud. The defendant Chad Daybell on October 19 did with the intent to defraud or deceive an insurer presented or caused to be presented to an insurer or another person in support a claim for payment or benefit, knowing that such statement contained false, incomplete, or misleading information. Insurance fraud again. Okay. And then that is it. Now, I suppose I could scratch my brain for like, what do I remember from the original trial when Laurie Vallow was on trial that pertains to Chad Daybell? Well, a couple of things I remember was that Chad rushed the funeral. Chad, just trying to remember, I think he made a call to the um, funeral service. I think he gave the wrong name. Um, but he wanted the burial to take place sooner than later. Trying to think, there were quite a few things that were. He didn't want an autopsy, and anyway, let me see if I can find that call, and then we can play that. So yeah, we have it. It's a 6-minute call. You guys ready? So it's about a 6-minute call that he makes.
Third ring answer.
Funeral home?
Hello, my name is I'm with their calls. How can I help you today?
We just had a death in the family, and we really don't want anything but a cremation, and then to send the cremains to a family in Louisiana. It's just a simple, nothing other than a cremation and sending him to his family for a service in Louisiana. So,
Why do you think he wants a cremation? Also, take note that just take note in the way that he's talking. Does he seem very kind of authoritative in his voice? Does he have a strong voice? I've got a friend who's got like a really powerful baritone. When we were on a boat together in Namibia, the French folks were like going crazy about him. I was like invisible next to him. Chad seems to have a very, you could say he's grief stricken, but I kind of get the sense that Chad is soft spoken, don't you? And I don't know if soft spoken necessarily adds up to agency.
is there any way to know a ballpark price on that?
Yes. And I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me transfer you over to the director who can assist you with the pricing. What is your name,
Okay.
please?
It is Chad Daybell.
How do you spell the last name, please?
Dabal, Daybell.
How are you related to the person who passed?
So, did you notice something there? Did you guys notice something? Let me play it again.
A-L, Daybell.
How do you spell the last name, please?
Dabal, Daybell.
Is that how you spell Daybell? You spell Daybell Dabal. Is that how you spell Daybell? Right, and that's exactly what Fotis Doulos did when he went to the. So instead of phoning the funeral services, or funeral home, he went to a valet service or a place that cleans vehicles, and he gave the name and the type of the vehicle incorrectly, and he also gave someone else's number. So you can see this is a sign of guilty knowledge, right? this is also something that Chad is going to have to explain in court, or certainly his lawyer is going to have to explain why, when you phoned the funeral, number one, why do you want a cremation? Ultimately, I don't think she was cremated. I think that was too expensive. Anyway. And then that's point number one. Point number two, why did you not give your correct name?
How are you related to the person who passed?
I'm his nephew.
I'm his nephew. Is that true? I'm his nephew. I'm not her husband. I'm his nephew.
And then also, this is for the Valley of the Suns in Chandler, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, he lives there in Chandler. I live in Iowa, so I'm just trying to help out.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yes, what is your uncle's name for reference, please?
He is John Daybell.
Your last name?
Very creative. His deceased relative's name's John. Didn't he just say now that he's from Iowa?
Thank you.
Yes, he lives there in Chandler. I live in Iowa, so
I live in
I'm just trying to
Iowa.
help out.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yes, what is your uncle's name for reference, please?
He is John Daybell.
Your last name?
D-A-B-A-L.
Okay.
The same. John.
Do you have a middle name?
Myron.
M-Y-R-O-N?
Yeah.
And Chad, what is your phone number in case we get disconnected?
Yeah. This number, 515. I don't actually know my own number.
Wow. So there he gets caught out. Now he's got to give a number. He doesn't want to give a number.
Let me look real quick.
Thank you.
So Zircon says, I can't get over how he looks like such a dork, but I think you've got to almost think of, wasn't Laurie using Chad basically just to get something that she wanted? Power. Laurie was feeling powerless in her own life. She didn't have any money. She was starting to lose her looks. And she could use Chad to become kind of more powerful in the sense that she would have more money, but also kind of more influence, in the sense that within his little scheme, within his story, she was also kind of a messenger from God and so on and so on. But if you think again about it, he's offering her the scheme. The scheme's coming from him. So who has agency in that equation? If you say she's using him to become more powerful, who is actually holding the power in this equation? So a minute ago we were at 53% Laurie, Chad 47%, neck and neck, right? It's really quite interesting.
Thank you. Is he at a nursing home, hospital, or residence?
He passed away in a hospital. I don't know the details. I'm just telling you.
Yeah, it's just for to know, because sometimes it's different if it's a residential or hospital or nursing home.
I'm
Okay.
thinking they're sending into the medical examiner. I'm not sure. I should have had more information before I called. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Alright. Cremation with shipping. To which which city?
New Orleans.
New Orleans, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, one moment please, Chad, but stay on the line. Let me
Okay.
transfer you over to the director who can assist you with that.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, Chad.
Yeah.
Thank you for holding. I do have the director, Clarissa, to further assist you.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Female Director with Vallow Cemetery. I understand that your uncle passed away.
Yes. And I'm just starting the process for the family. He didn't have many relatives. I'm his nephew. I live in Iowa. But what they want to do is, it's, yeah, sad to see him go. Yeah, I think he's going to the medical examiner. I don't know all the details, but what the family basically wants is just to have him cremated there in Chandler and then have the cremains shipped to New Orleans.
D. Patterson, thanks for joining
Bill
us.
to surface
Enjoy your
later.
dinner.
So just trying to get a ballpark price.
Okay. So for a cremation, we are able to do our cremation for $1,695. Now, what that's going to include is the transportation into our care, the transportation to and from our crematory, our basic professional fees, as well as our crematory fee. Now, there's going to be a couple other charges there for you.
Okay.
So we are going to have death certificates, which are $20 a piece, with a processing fee,
Okay.
$15 permit fee,
All right.
and then we're able to do that transfer through the mail for you, and that's $150 fee for you.
Okay. Like the UPS or something, I guess.
Okay.
So close about 2,000 probably, kind of a ballpark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Close to, yeah.
Okay. Well, that helps me a lot. I'm going to call one or two others, but I'll get back to you if we come that direction. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. If you need anything else, give me a call.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. Someone asked, when was this call made? It was the day after Charles Vallow died. So it seemed to be for Charles Vallow, not for Tammy. I'm just wondering whether there wasn't another call then. Anyway, let's have a look at the evidence related to Tammy Daybell. Cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation, not a heart attack as previously believed. So, like what that's showing you is that, I don't know if you guys remember, Chad, it seemed to be in the media narrative that there was concern over her health and that she apparently coughed before she died, right? And then I remember, I think her aunt or her sister saying that, but Tammy was healthy, she was a jogger, and so they weren't convinced that it was a heart attack. And so, but it took a while for it to become public knowledge about this. Yeah, let's just deal with this because this is likely to come up at trial. Tammy was married to Chad Daybell for 28 years before she reportedly died in her sleep. Her friend said she was healthy and in training for a marathon before her sudden death. I don't think it was a marathon. I think it turned out to be just maybe a half marathon or a 10-kilometer race. Deputies responded and found Tammy dead in the Salem, Idaho home. An autopsy was not performed, and Tammy was buried 3 days later. Now, if you think about that, 3 days is pretty damn quick, right? Very, very quick. Friend and co-worker Mandy Fowler and multiple sources told KSL TV that Chad Daybell refused to have an autopsy performed on his wife. They expressed concerns about Tammy Daybell's funeral, which they felt was rushed. Can't remember whether Chad called regarding this as well. Does anybody know? So, yeah, they say Chad's children told CBS that Chad didn't refuse the autopsy, they did. Now, one thing that's really fascinating in a very disturbing way is Chad has 5 kids. And when his kids have appeared on TV and in interviews, they've invariably said they think that their father's being framed. By who, for what? But anyway, that's their story. And then they also say that they've also backed Chad up by saying that she was in failing health. And then Chad married Lori Vallow just 2 weeks later. 2 weeks after Tammy's death, Chad marries Lori, and of course they go on honeymoon to Hawaii with no family members present. Blake explained that in October 2019, Tammy came face to face with a masked man pointing a gun at her. That same day, according to Blake, Vallow Daybell called an unnamed individual and said he can't do anything right. So you kind of get the idea that that was the original way to get rid of Tammy. The day Tammy Daybell was confronted by a gunman, Alex Cox was in the location. The only person Alex Cox knew in the area was Chad Daybell. So, the bottom line is we don't really have a terrible amount of information about Tammy's death. It was covered at trial. I don't really know if I was in court when it was. As far as I remember, they didn't show autopsy images, certainly of JJ, to us, the gallery. And then I seem to remember after I left court, then they dealt with Tammy Daybell, and then they did show the autopsy images when I wasn't at court. So I can't tell you about that. Just have a look at what they say here. Pink foam was coming from Tammy Daybell's mouth. I do remember that being reported. And so what's the significance of that? See if I can play this without you guys hearing it. I just need to get through this ad. Just a second.
I was looking because you kind of want to look. She was 49, so I was like, this is unusual because she's not that old. So I was kind of looking for things like on her neck or bruising, scratches, those kind of things. And I observed just some bruising on a bicep. I think it was her right arm and forearm, but they didn't look new. They looked more like an older bruise.
So that's quite important. I've heard some folks saying that she was held down and that's where the bruising came from. I'm not convinced of that. That's why I say I imagine that there was some kind of sedative used, and then maybe while she was sedated, she was um, um, asphyxiated, right? But I don't really imagine this sort of life and death battle where she's conscious. I don't really imagine that. Um, so the other fact that's sort of difficult to understand is, what does that foam mean? And I remember it coming up, but I can't remember what they said about it. In other words, that is it normal when you do CPR that someone's mouth foams and it's sort of a bloody foam? As far as I'm aware, it's not normal. Um, but that does seem to suggest that there was asphyxia, and that is what ruptured the lungs. Let's play the rest of
I
this.
didn't notice anything weird that way. I mean, maybe her color was normal for being deceased.
Do you notice anything regarding Tammy's face?
Besides the foam? No.
And when you talk about the foam, does that appear to be what you observed that day?
Yeah, and that's they get like a pink frothy foam, like a bleeding. That's what I assumed that to be, like some blood.
And you were saying with the pink foam?
Yeah, in my knowledge, I was thinking of things like congestive heart failure, something that I know that maybe could cause that with the pink frothing. And so my mind kind of went to that, and I was thinking that she's looking for things like swelling and things that would go with that, but I didn't see any other signs.
So I don't know, like maybe I've watched too many movies, but when I think of pink froth, I think of spies who ingest some kind of toxin. I kind of think about it associated with a kind of a toxin, right? So the pink froth is definitely odd, isn't it?
With that.
And did that pink foam, had you ever been to a death scene where you had seen that before?
I had not.
Did it cause you some concern?
It did. It caused me enough concern that I got my phone and I actually looked up poisoning, and I looked up foam from a dead person. I looked up poisoning just because I thought it was weird and I had not seen that before.
Well, the deputy was soon joined by the big coroner. That's Brenda Dye. And she had never attended to an asphyxiation before, ever. She did have some experience, though, but she just ultimately took Chad's word. And they said natural causes. And when Chad said, oh, no, there's really no need for, an autopsy. That won't be necessary. They took Chad's word. And
so again, that sort of raises this idea of agency. Chad said that, and they basically accepted what he said. And if you think about it, initially the disappearance of the children was accepted even by the Woodcocks for quite a long period of time. So I don't think it's fair to say that Chad and Laurie had no agency whatsoever. But to me, the more interesting question is who had the most agency between the two of them, because they certainly had agency in different areas, but ultimately, who had the most agency? I do want to come back to what I said earlier about if Chad and Laurie, well, let me put it like this. Do you think Chad and Laurie, aside from their religious beliefs, had much agency? If you separate Chad and Laurie, Laurie's wherever she is with her kids. Chad is with his family writing self-published books that aren't selling terribly well. He's certainly not making much of an income out of them. And so separate in their own little lives, do they experience themselves as being powerful and having agency, right? And that's what's so crazy and curious about this case is separated and as individuals, they were both fairly kind of powerless, helpless people, kind of trying to survive, really, in a way. And yet, when they came together, the one seemed to empower the other seemed to empower the other. There was a kind of sexual agency that was being kind of manufactured. There's kind of a religious agency. I think that was the main thing that was coming into play. But certainly the one felt, and haven't you ever heard it? Someone brings out the best in somebody else. You can be in a relationship where your agency is activated. You can be in a relationship where your potential starts being recognized and tapped. There's a really good channel on YouTube, Team Charles Barkley. It's a triathlon channel, where there's like a husband and wife, a couple who are triathletes, but the husband really, in a way, coaches and trains with, and is kind of a sidekick to his world champion wife, right? But in a weird way, he often seems to believe in her more than she believes in herself, and that's really often so surprising. And so, in the same way that you can be in a relationship where you bring out the best in somebody else, you can also bring out the worst in somebody else. And maybe you like that. Maybe you like a bad boy or whatever it is. And you can also bring out the worst in somebody else. And I do think the Doomsday Mom story is a story of two people bringing the worst out in one another, the worst impulses. I don't think it's the same with Chris Watts and Nicole Kessinger. I think Chris Watts brought out the worst in himself. I don't think it's a case that Nicole Kessinger brought out the worst in him. Like, I don't think she deliberately did that. I think she did say, "I don't want to play second fiddle. I don't want to be second in your life." I think, but the way he interpreted that, the way he dealt with that, I don't think was her fault or her responsibility. In the same way as in this case, where you have them deliberately choosing who lives, who dies, and how they profit. They literally profit from the deaths of other people. Melamine poisoning. Okay, it could be. So one area for me that the Daybell trial, where there's definitely going to be something to learn about the Daybell trial, is the circumstances around Tammy's death. What was their relationship like? What did she text her friends? Did she have any suspicions? Also, are any of Chad's children, he's got 5 children, are all 5 children going to remain silent? Are any of Chad's kids going to testify? First of all, testify. Are any of them going to testify for their mother? Like, in the sense of for the prosecution. And I would say, don't hold your breath. I mean, in the Barry Morphew case, would you imagine Suzanne's daughters testifying against their father? I can't imagine that happening. Which one feels is scary in itself, isn't it? Imagine if you are a parent and you married and your partner murders you and your children support your murderer. Just it's pretty incomprehensible. I'm just saying, if that is the case, it is pretty horrible. Sonia says, I think the kids are going to have their eyes opened a lot to a lot of things in this trial. I'm not that convinced. I think sometimes denial can be especially when it comes to blood relatives, it's in your own interest to deny, because what have you got left if you don't? Let me put it this way. Like think about Buster Murdoch and his father. If you believe your surviving parent is a murderer, then you kind of lose that parent as well. So it's almost like a defense mechanism. Aren't you going to choose to believe that this relative, it's the only one you've got left? Well, do you have any choice? If you don't believe in them, well, then you're going to kind of lose them. Do you see what I'm getting at? Exactly. MCP says, good questioning tonight. Really like to compare with other cases. It helps understand how true crime works. Yeah. Certainly the children were in denial the last time we saw them. They said that their father's been framed. So, have they changed their minds in the meantime? I wouldn't count on it. Yeah, exactly. Let's just see if there's anything else in this interview.
She was buried 3 days later. Buried in the ground. Boom. Samantha, her sister, asked Chad, what are you doing? Burying her in Springville, like not even in Rexford, where you and the kids live. Oh, well, it's cold up here. No one will visit.
Can I make a observation? And some of you may not like it, but I mean, I haven't actually watched News Nation, certainly not Banfield, for months, I think. So I'm really surprised to see Ashley so dramatic and kind of emotional. And you might say that's your problem. You're not dramatic or emotional enough. You're very flat, and there's not enough drama. Use your facial expressions and show some emotion, kind of thing. And I suppose I could do that, but I find like it's quite hard to stick to that thread and to think sensibly when you kind of performing, if you know what I mean. I suppose one could learn to do it, but I'm kind of more focused not on how I appear, but on trying to effectively um, um, find that thread, find the narrative, right? That's kind of where my energy is going. And, I don't know about you, but I remember Ashley Banfield from some time ago where she would give analysis in a fairly undramatic way, in a professional kind of way. And, saying things like boom is a very youthful, it's kind of like, there are some quite young folks in true crime that are doing fantastically well. And you sort of wonder, are they kind of influencing some of the commentators and so on? What is your opinion on that? I'll just be interested to know. Do you think it's appropriate do you think true crime needs Nancy Grace's, needs that sort of almost hysterical indignation, needs that sort of excess emotion, or does it actually need to be grounded? Do you feel that it needs to be kind of more serious? Is it kind of a joke, and it's almost the Daily Show version, but it's true crime? And I understand when you're talking about serious subjects, humor and drama and emotion can be a way to not only make it interesting, but you can reach certain people so that you're not preaching to them. But where I kind of depart from that a little bit is, if you take this kind of thing, I don't really want to point to Ashley when I said, but I mean, if you take the drama, you can't really take drama into a courtroom. If you've ever sat in a courtroom, there's no laughing, there's no basically the way I'm talking to you now, you have adults in an adult discussion making adult arguments without resorting to emotion, and basically there is evidence led, and it's done in a scientific way. It's sort of what proof do you have? Can you make a sensible argument? And then there's the answer, right? And then the jury listen, and it's can be quite a long, painful process, quite a dry thing. And so if you say, well, that is how it's done in the courtroom, well, we outside the courtroom, we can actually have fun, and we can play, and we can do all of that. Really, can we? Is it appropriate to do that? So, if you say it is appropriate to do that, if you just think about the Rust case, can you have a defendant go on TV and basically not make up a story, but tell a story, and then because you like the story, you support the person. Because you like the story, you believe the story. In other words, is entertainment the new truth, or is truth truth? Because I think there's a difference. Or can you say, I prefer entertaining truth to truth? I think there may need to be a different genre, true crime and entertaining crime, because there's a difference. I'm going to talk to you about this case, and I'm going to roll my eyes, and I'm going to make funny little noises, and you're really going to like me, and I'm going to get a lot of follows and a lot of support. But am I really talking about the case? Am I really thinking about the case? Am I really dealing with the case in a way that's important from a societal perspective, where you say, this is a tear in the fabric of society. This is, people died, people were buried, there were horrible motives at play here. You can turn it all into a joke where you roll your eyes, and you have inflections in your voice, and it's all very oh, can't believe he did that. Or is there a more serious message to come out of it, that, wow, not only Laurie Vallow is not the only person that has gone to desperate measures to deal with helplessness. It's like a serious subject deserving of serious attention. I've definitely learned over the period of time that I've been in true crime and observed true crime communities, and observed other true crime creators. I've realized that it's definitely not one size fits all, and there definitely is there's an audience for every creator, and if you don't like that, well, that's the way it is. Some people like someone who has a doctor in front of their name, even if they're a doctor of social work or whatever it is. Some people like a guy sitting in a suit and tie. Some people like a guy with makeup and fog rolling in and haunting music, and them saying, I don't want to scare you. Or I just remember watching something where he said, this is so scary, and if we can find the truth, we don't need to be scared anymore. But the whole atmosphere is scary. And so, like at the end of the day, we in the true crime medium, and you kind of got to ask yourself, okay, so we're dealing with bullshitters, someone who started a cult, right, by bullshitting their supporters. So is that totally different in true crime? You don't have true crime cults. You don't have people who believe in conspiracies and believe in the counter narrative because it needs to have legs so that you can keep the show on the road, right? In other words, you don't have that in true crime as well. And so I'm just saying, which one lends itself more to bullshitting and manipulation? Someone who, in a very kind of normal, in trial, in court way, is trying to make a cogent argument about criminals, about motives, about murder, about the criminal mind, about evidence, about all of that kind of thing, about dead bodies, dead people. or should we sort of boom, and sort of make it sort of melodramatic? True crime is something that dare I say it? True crime is something that really happened. It's not a fairy tale. It's not a movie. It's not a TV episode. And I don't know, like what's quite strange is, like I said, when I went to the Laurie Vallow trial, a mother and daughter came into court. They'd flown in from Oregon, and they said, "Oh my God, she's real." Yeah, she is real. All these people are real, and I sort of feel like people forget that. It's like these are true stories about real people, real children that are really dead, that they're going to be dead forever. And you might think that, by laughing about it or joking about it, separates you the from that world. It doesn't. It doesn't separate. Maybe you might feel better thinking that. So so I don't know. The other side of the story is, you might say, but we are alive. We are on the other side of that coin, and maybe the best way of dealing with a very dark subject is with a little bit of levity. Maybe the right answer to that is, hey, lighten up. Um, shit has happened, and there are some crazy people in the world. I'm not one of them. You're not one of them. Let's find out about what this is without getting all down on ourselves, kind of thing. This is a serious enough topic to make it even more serious. Is that another side of that whole argument? I just want to. So I've just made like a long speech. I did that to kind of get to the 2 hour point. I wanted to kind of at least get there. Let's see what you guys say in response. Rookie says, that's what I like about your channel. You keep it real. I can trust your information. Pauline says, first time I stepped inside a courtroom, I felt overwhelmed by the seriousness of it. It is serious. And you know what? This is something that my friend Lisa Wilson, Juror 13, told me. She said, when you're a juror, you are deciding someone's life. You are part of a group that is going to decide whether somebody spends 10 years or 20 years of their life in prison or not. And that can be a devastating responsibility, right? I don't know about you guys, but I sometimes sit in court, and there are moments where you can hear a pin drop. There are moments just before the verdict is read. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, where you can feel your heart beating. It's almost like when someone says guilty, it's almost like the murders were committed. The murders were committed, but you almost feel like they committed again. And it's almost like that's the moment where reality becomes real. I felt that a little bit in the Michelle Troconis trial, where did you conspire to murder the woman in whose house you're living, the woman who was married to this man? Did you conspire to do that? When the guilty verdict comes out, it's almost like it suddenly becomes real. You thought it was real, now it is real. That is a really subtle case, the Michelle Troconis case, and that's a case where you can't afford to lose concentration. It's a very good example of a case where you've got to maintain concentration, and it was a very long, arduous case, wasn't it? For those of you who covered it with me. Lois says, it's as if some segment of society wants a true crime video game. Yeah. Chelsea says, it's very serious, especially when you're a juror. Hedy B says, I look to your channel for fair and balanced. That is a rare commodity. Janine says, I like that you make us think deeper than we might otherwise. Okay, I appreciate that. Hedy B says, these presenters are after their ratings. So anyone want to offer some criticism? You need to do this more, you need to do that less. Ellie says, it's a mob mentality and feeds off each other. So one thing I have felt quite a lot with true crime is, and I find this very strange. Maybe you guys might be on the other side and say, it doesn't bother me, it doesn't affect me. I don't know what you're talking about. But what I find quite strange is you can talk about a case, right? And then at some point the case is decided in some way, right? And the whole thing with true crime creators is, did you tell a lie? But you said that, and all of these statements that are made, but yet none of that seems to apply to them. So in other words, if you said that Kylie Rodney was murdered, right, then no one can come back to you and say, but that's not what the autopsy showed, and that's not what the evidence showed, and that's not what the police investigation showed, and that's not what the family think. But because you've got enough popular support, it doesn't really matter. But then you say, but didn't you get that wrong? And then something else, but didn't you get that wrong? But then it kind of becomes like, but if we believe you, then you got it right. No, but that's not really what we're talking about. And if you take the John Benet Ramsey case, where you'll have some creators saying, and I mean, I really reacted to this. You'll have a creator who hasn't written a single book about the John Benet Ramsey case, probably hasn't read many articles about it. He's a young guy, and he basically says, breaking, John Benet's killer has been found, and it's basically Gary Oliva. Breaking news, Gary Oliva has confessed to committing the crime. And it's like, but like, it's almost like this is now breaking worldwide scoop news. And it's like, but Gary Oliva's been in the news from that for the past 23 years or so. And so is there any kind of accountability for making those kind of statements that are demonstrably false? So in other words, this is true crime spreading fake news. So is there any kind of accountability, like what you said there isn't true? So you say, no, but it could be true. Gary Oliva may have committed this crime. Okay, but he's now out of jail and he's not, there's no charges, there's no interest in him whatsoever. But 6 months ago, it was like Gary Oliva committed the crime, his handwriting matched. Wow, I got 1 million views, but now we don't even care about it. It's like schizophrenic. It's like incredibly schizophrenic. And so also in the same way that you can get all hype and all emotional and it's all very shocking and so on, but then you go to the next case and you're all hyper and you're all shocked and you're all emotional about it. Is all of that genuine? I mean, are you genuinely shocked about Gary Oliva? Okay, well, today, aren't you still genuinely shocked about him? And all I'm trying to say is, in crime cases like, the murder of Tammy Daybell, we want the case to go to trial. We want accountability. What about accountability for true crime creators? Like, are they telling the truth? If they don't tell the truth, whether it's by mistake or ignorance or whatever it is, are they held accountable? Can't you say to them, you made this video and it's just not true? Yet another video you made is also not true. Does anyone hold them to that kind of standard? Or is it, wow, that was so shocking and interesting, I really enjoyed that, on and on and on and on and on and on. And it's just like, my subscribers are growing and everyone was shocked and it was all a lot of fun. And then you say, what kind of society are we turning into as a result? Are we like shock jocks? We just sort of, if you think about it, if that's how you treat true crime, like it's just kind of entertainment, don't take it so seriously, it's just this thing, then aren't we becoming a sociopathic society where you don't really care about what's going on. It's just a sort of popular thing, just popular, just kind of where the ball is rolling, right? And that's why, like, I mean, I'm going to America in about 2 weeks, and I'm going to try and get into the courtroom in Delphi, and I've walked the woods in Delphi. I've walked through the stream in Delphi. I've walked across the bridge, and I have a, I don't want to say connection, but I certainly have an interest in that particular case, and I'm interested in what happened there. I would like to see some of the photos that no one has ever seen, because if you don't go into the courtroom, sometimes you'll never see those photos. And I don't want to see photos to be shocked by them, or I want to see photos because I want to know what happened. And I felt like I got those answers when I attended the Mo Wilson trial, right? I'm just trying to say that without that gravitas, without that genuine interest, isn't what is going on one big party, one big money-making party? Thank you, Earth. Earth gifted a True Crime Rocket Science membership. It's just something that I notice every now and then is, you know, honesty, I find, is like just honesty, telling the truth, I find is something that is rarer than you might think. Telling the truth is harder than you might think. I'm actually locked in a bit of a legal battle with an insurer. Remember, I got COVID, and I guess I overshared. I said I thought I might have had tick bite fever. I thought that's why my symptoms were fairly bad, and so they said. So now they're using that statement, a statement I made against me. So it's kind of quite a ironic situation to be in. Can you tell how can you put it? Can you be too truthful? If you're in a relationship with someone, like there's that robot in the one movie, what's your honesty setting? 90%. 90%. Total truth isn't recommended with emotional beings. That is a reality in itself, which is certainly quite sad, that we as people can't handle, that saying, you can't handle the truth. That is actually true. We can only handle a certain amount of truth. We can only handle a certain amount of reality. And I don't mean by that 10% needs to be lies, just that sometimes that other 10% is too on the nose. I don't know. It's kind of just an interesting thing. So anyway, let's come back to agency. Now, I want you guys to think about agency throughout this case. The trial starts tomorrow, but I want you to think about actually how little agency Chair Daybell had in his little life, publishing self-help books that didn't really get any traction. I doubt whether I actually wanted to see his Amazon income as a self-published author myself. I've had to publish over 100 books, and they get a lot of traction in true crime, but you've still got to work incredibly hard to make any kind of living as an author. I really wanted to see what his income was. I think that may have come out, but it'll probably come out in this case as well. But within the context of Chad, who I really don't think had a lot of personal agency, which is why he wanted to leave the situation he was in, why he wanted a Laurie Vallow in his life. He wanted the sexy bombshell in his life. He wanted to go to Hawaii and sort of live it up. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with wanting to live an expanded version of your current life. If anything, it's part of the living force in us that wants to live, right? It's good to follow your bliss, and it's good to be energized, and it's good to, right? And so that is good, but how you apply it, how you interpret it, how it manifests, that's the critical thing. Do you do it by writing books, cheating on your wife, murdering your whatever? Do you do it that way? And so if you say no, okay, obvious answer no. Okay, so then how do you do it? Right? How do you achieve agency? And I think there are a couple of answers. You need resources for agency, and you might say money, but it could also be people that could help you. It could also be psychological resources, so you could read books, maybe like this one, maybe not. But if you want to improve your agency, and I think that's a worthy goal, right? Your personal agency, not what somebody else thinks your agency is, what your agency is. How can you affect that? Think about that seriously. Think about what is my agency. And I'm going to give you a stupid example, but yesterday I found a pipe just lying on the ground in my garden. And I felt just this sense of complete helplessness. What am I going to do about this? Right. And a little bit later on, after that pipe had been lying there the whole day, by the way, I put the pipe there to begin with. It basically drains rainwater from my balcony into a water tank, which I use to water my garden. So I'd actually set everything up there. But anyway, there was this pipe lying in my garden, and I was just like, wow, I don't know what to do about this. And so, in other words, I was in a strange place where I suddenly felt my agency was very low, right? And all I did was I eventually just got tired of seeing the pipe, eventually being at the end of the day, got a chair, got some string, and put the whole thing together. And I did it in 5 or 10 minutes. And so agency is very much just deciding to believe in yourself and just deciding to put your hands on. It's like a rocket. You burn the most fuel just in that process of taking off. In terms of agency, you burn the most fuel just in deciding to do something. So if you want to change your body or lose weight or get fitter or get stronger, stop thinking about it. Stop trying to generate that agency. Just do it, and the agency will come. As you do. The how can I put it? As you do it, the ability to do it will follow, right? So that's one side of it. The other side of it is, what is your agency like with other people? And that's something that you've got to do some self analysis, where you ask people that question. Also, I had a little bit of a revelation when I traveled with my friend Brian. Like, he's got incredible agency. He's incredibly charming. He's incredibly affable. He's incredibly friendly. And anyone can choose to be that at any time. But of course, you don't need to be the life and soul of the party. It's got to be also realistic and sustainable. But you can also just decide, well, is my level of whatever it is, hyperness, too low or too high? Does it need to be adjusted? Look at that. Faith in your ability to handle a wide range of tasks and situations. If your faith is high, it might actually be unrealistically high. If your faith is high that you can deal with anything, you might be in for a hard landing. If your faith is low, well, it could be two things. Maybe you need a pep talk. Maybe you just need to get out of a funk. Or maybe you need to work on something. Maybe you need to get out a bit more. Maybe you need to work on your confidence. But the other side of having low faith in your ability, like Lucy Charles Barkley, the Ironman athlete, is if you have low faith and you work hard, you can actually have a situation where in the race itself, it feels effortless. If you have a humble sense of yourself, if you have and I don't want to say, think less of yourself. I'm just saying, if you have like a humble, somewhat reserved, somewhat conservative attitude to your own abilities, then you have a better chance of meeting whatever obstacles you're going to come in a way that you're going to be able to overcome them. And Lucy Charles has said, there's an incredible video that she put up where she had come second 4 or 5 times. I know I'm straying a bit from the topic, but I'm going to end off in a few minutes. She'd come second 4 or 5 times in like the Ironman World Championships. And then she trained with the psychology of what does it take to win this race? Not I've come second 5 times, it's just inevitable that I'm going to win. Like, I need to go up another step. What do I need to do that? Right? I need to take things up another level, in terms of discipline, in terms of all of these different things. And her partner said he noticed a change in her where she would get up without complaining. She would get up at this time and train. Just that there was there was just a focus there that wasn't there before, that this is what I need to do, right? And amazingly, in that race, she came out the water first, I think, in a new record, came off the bike first, also in a new record. And then as she started the run, she tore part of her calf muscle. And so she said every single step that she took in that race, she was in excruciating pain. But guess what? Because of that humility, because she'd worked so hard, because of the effort that had got in, because of her humility, she felt the pain of coming second is worse than the pain that I'm actually experiencing. And so she ran this whole marathon after cycling 180 kilometers. She ran the whole marathon with a calf tear where every single footstep hurt, but she was able to transcend that because of her own agency, because of her control that she had developed over her life, her psychological control, physical control, spiritual control, by training really, really, really hard, by being accepting that pain is a reality, difficulty is a reality, obstacles are a reality, and when something really bad happens, you don't just throw in the cards and give up. And so she ran this entire marathon with a calf tear and still won by something like 8 minutes. I think her partner said she ran the backup time, so she could run the marathon in a super fast time, but if something went wrong, she could run it in a backup time. And that was the time that she ended up running it. What that shows you just is this incredible, we do have the potential, this incredible potential to have psychological resilience if we have the right level of agency. And agency is something that can be honed, just like an athlete. You can learn agency through training. You can learn agency through repeatedly doing. You can learn agency through discipline. You can learn agency through controlling your thoughts and your behavior repeatedly. And so when something hits you that's like a curveball, you can kind of take it in your stride. You can you can deal with it from a perspective of psychological stability. You can deal with change and something that you would almost imagine would be a catastrophe for somebody else. You can kind of take in your stride, not that it's going to be easy, but because you've put such a high standard upon yourself, that you do have the ability to deal with it. And that's exactly what she did. And guess what? She became world champion. Through that effort, through that struggle, she won the race, and she's now the Ironman world champion. Incredible story, but the same kind of applies to you. Now, the story I've just told you is the good way of gaining agency over your life. And it's through hard things like discipline, humility, focus, training, effort, blood, sweat, and tears, all of that kind of thing. The bad way, as far as I'm concerned, of gaining agency is through bluster, bullshitting, getting emotional, being dramatic, and all of that, which is like this hollow balloon. And guess what? You can gain an incredible amount of let's call it temporary support, or even you can get a lot of resources around you. God knows that can sometimes be around you your whole life. You might be a movie star like Alec Baldwin. You maybe get all of this agency, even if it is to some extent artificial, and maybe it'll see you through. There's a very good chance that you're going to build that on a psychologically unstable platform. And you might do very, very well until something catastrophic happens. And guess what? The chance of that house of cards remaining standing is very, very unlikely. And that's why you need that level of humility, reserved resilience, right? And that's just my opinion. I mean, that's the way that works for me, and the way that what I believe. And certainly, it's not perhaps for everybody. But anyway, there's my rant over. I do want you guys to think about agency in your lives, and maybe come back to me in a comment, and maybe even if you're on Patreon, let me know if you thought about it and what you thought about, because it's such an interesting thing. It's You can change your own personal power if you choose to, but it starts by coming out of denial, or coming out of wherever you are, whether you realize your agency is where it needs to be or not. In other words, it's coming back to reality and then deciding how you want reality to change. Do you want it to change this way or that way? Right? Zircon says, will you be here tomorrow? I'm going to be covering the Chad Daybell trial, but if they're going to keep that sort of distant perspective where you can barely see their faces, then I might switch over to the Karen Reed case, which starts next week. So it depends on the trial itself, I guess. It also depends on like if the trial kind of moves, or whether it's sort of if it's a lot like the Michelle Troconis trial. I'm not sure if I will cover it. So I don't know. I'm hoping it's going to move quite quickly, but I guess we'll see. I just want to read some of your comments before leaving. Ellie says, are we having a book club? Can I get back to you on that? I'll get back to you on that. Ison, I actually saw some of the photos that we took in Oregon. It brought back some pretty good memories. Christine says, I hope you have moments of clarity in your grief, Fran. Okay. Yeah, there's some really good songs about well, I don't know if it's about agency, but it feels like it's about where you are in your world. 10,000 Maniacs, Edie Brickell and the New Bohemians, and so on. I mean, I think a lot of music resonates with us because it resonates with our sense of where we are in our world, you know. Hedy B says, because of your presentations, I have changed. I appreciate that. Jojo says, it's taking action, not just talking about it. Yeah, I mean, a lot of YouTube and a lot of YouTubers are just talk. And I have to say, I don't want to be one of those. I want to, like, another aspect of my life that I think is important is physical activity, being fit, being strong, being healthy. And that's not something you can talk your way into. That's something you've got to do. 1 minute to go. Then I've equaled at least the live stream I did yesterday. Good question. I don't know what the answer is. hard to imagine it would be shorter than 3 weeks. At least a month, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, anyway, I hope you found this analysis worthwhile. Basically, I actually got wrong-footed a little bit. I thought that affidavit was all about Chad Daybell and only half of it was. So, like, I didn't actually prepare it beforehand. I really should have. But I kind of winged the rest, and I think it kind of worked out fairly well. But I would have preferred to have had that information about Tammy Daybell. I don't know if it is available, to be quite honest. I don't know if there's very little information about her autopsy. There's very little information about, certainly like in an affidavit thing, about the crime scene evidence at in Chad's home. I don't know whether we're going to see pictures. That's another thing that I found frustrating when we covered the case in Boise, was even when you saw crime scene images, they were kind of not that close. I mean, we weren't allowed to share them. We weren't allowed to take photos. But even so, you were still, there was like a distance between the viewer and the screen. That seems to be the culture of handling cases in that particular courtroom. And that's one reason why, personally, just my own feeling, I wouldn't really want the Brian Kohberger trial. Selfishly, I think it would be good for the Kohberger trial to go to that courtroom for that trial. But in terms of being able to follow it, whether on YouTube or even if you were there, I think it would be more closed for us. But the priority shouldn't really be that. It should be that the case gets presented to the jury in the best possible way, right? Okay, 2:31:34. I'm out of here. So I am really looking forward to the opening arguments tomorrow. I think, you often get a couple of nuggets, a couple of things that you've never heard before sometimes come out in the opening arguments. One thing that I think may surprise some of you, I still remember that some of the texts that they did salvage between Chad and Laurie were very like graphic, very kind of sexual. And it might surprise you that Chad and Laurie were so sexually available to one another. But that is definitely one of the currencies on which this case was the reason why this crime happened, was because of this incredible sexual fire that overtook both of them, especially Chad, in my opinion. Okay, go Timmy. Okay. For those of you who are interested, I've just posted a video on Team Peachtree just showing a drive I did to a place called Nature's Valley. It just shows just how incredibly quickly the landscape changes from pretty much desert, very, very dry, go over the folded mountains, and then there's lush forest, beautiful beaches on the other side. So if you're curious, go and check it out, Team Peachtree. It's the last video that I put up there. Thanks everyone for being here. Appreciate you listening to this long speech about standards and the story about agency from that triathlete's perspective. Do yourself a favor and go to the YouTube channel Team Charles Barkley. Do I need to put it here? Team, even if you're not very sporty, it's very inspiring. And look at the video she put up on the World Championship race in Hawaii. She also answered some questions. I find that very inspiring, very motivating, and maybe I can, maybe some of that can rub off on you guys. Okay, so that's it from me. Nothing more to say except thanks to the mods. Terry as well. Terry actually sent quite a few photos from Jacksonville, Wyoming, and also the Grand Tetons, and some of the places that Gabby Petito went to, I haven't really had a chance to look at all of them and or even know what to do with them. Terry must sort of let me know what you think I should do. Should I put them on Patreon or should I put them on YouTube members only? And you want to send me a narrative with that, maybe might just be a bit more meaningful. Maybe even a voice recording where you can just say what that was all about. What your journey was in terms of that, because I did see some of it. It was quite interesting, quite moving. Last thing I want to say is I am uploading audiobook chapters of The Day After Christmas, which is a John Benet Ramsey book that I wrote. So it's the audiobook that's going up, and it deals with literally the period in the aftermath. So that is what's going on Patreon right now. It's on the $10 tier. Okay, I need to drink a glass of water and attend to my dog. Good night, guys. I'll see you guys here for the opening statements in the Chad Daybell murder trial, and we'll see how that goes. So I look forward to seeing you guys. What is the poll? Wow, so close. 185 votes, 52% say Laurie had more agency than Chad, 48%. Pretty neck and neck, eh? Really, really close. Really I'm quite surprised to see that. I in my personal opinion, I think Laurie had a lot of agency, but this trial, I think, will show that Chad did too. How much? Well, we'll see. Okay, so that's it from me. Again, thanks, mods. Welcome to new subscribers. And thanks for the couple of literally 2 super chats, but I do appreciate that. Okay, remember, if you are watching this on replay, you can also hit the thanks button. I am going to America, so I'm going to need a little bit of extra pocket money. I hope those of you who are listening to this on replay who felt inspired by what I said about agency, I hope that is going to be something that may have some kind of positive impact on your life. I do think one needs to think about it every now and then. And we will talk about it again, but in the context of this trial, at some point. Take care, Iceland. All you guys, Shaker Maker, thank you. On that note, I'm out of here. See you guys tomorrow, where we will follow the trial. Bonne nuit. Tout le monde. Okay. Cheers, guys.